Sarah Mitchell stood in line at the small ice cream parlor on 5th Street, watching a 7-year-old boy in front of her carefully count crumpled dollar bills and scattered coins with the focused determination of someone handling the world's most precious treasure. His tiny fingers moved slowly across each penny, his lips moving silently as he calculated. Whether he had enough money for something that seemed far more important than a simple frozen treat, the boy wore a faded red t-shirt.
Yes.
That was slightly too big for his small frame, and sneakers that had seen better days. But his eyes held a brightness that caught Sarah's attention immediately, a kind of mature tenderness that seemed unusual for someone so young. She had been having one of those days where everything felt heavy, or her own problems seemed insurmountable, and she had stopped for ice cream, hoping the simple sweetness might lift her spirits, not expecting to witness something that would change her entire perspective on what truly matters in life. Sarah worked as a marketing executive at a busy firm downtown. It's constantly rushing between meetings, phone calls, and deadlines that never seemed to end. She had been so caught up in her own stress, her own disappointments, and her own struggles with a recent divorce that she had almost forgotten how to notice the small moments of beauty that existed all around her. The quiet acts of love that happened every day while she was too distracted to see them. The ice cream parlor was one of those. Old-fashioned places with checkered floors, red vinyl booths, and the kind of charm that made you feel like you had stepped back in time to when life moved slower and people had more time for each other. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting warm golden light across the small crowd of families and couples enjoying their treats, creating an atmosphere of simple contentment that Sarah hadn't experienced in months as she watched. The little boy continued counting his money with such careful precision. Sarah found herself wondering about his story, about what had brought him here alone, about why he seemed so determined to make sure he had enough money for whatever he was planning to buy. There was something about his quiet intensity that reminded her of her own childhood, of the times when small gestures felt like the most important things in the world. When the boy finally reached the counter, he stood on his tiptoes to see over the glass display case filled with colorful scoops of ice cream, his eyes scanning the options with the seriousness of someone making a life-changing decision. The teenage girl behind the counter smiled down at him patiently, clearly charmed by his careful deliberation.
Oh.
While Sarah found herself leaning forward slightly, inexplicably invested in what this small stranger would choose: 2 ice creams. "Please," the boy said in a clear, confident voice that carried across the small space, causing Sarah to tilt her head in curiosity because she had assumed he was alone, looking around to see if perhaps a parent or sibling was waiting at one of the tables. When she saw no one else who seemed to belong with him, she wondered if maybe he was meeting someone. If perhaps this was some kind of planned treat with a friend. The girl behind the counter asked him what flavors he wanted, his small hands against the glass, studying each option with intense concentration before pointing to the strawberry ice cream. "This one is pretty and pink, and this one," he moved his finger to point at vanilla, "this one is like the color of clouds, soft and gentle. So I think these are perfect because they're the kind of flavors that make people feel better when they're having a hard day." Sarah felt her throat tighten at the boy's words, struck by the wisdom and thoughtfulness in his simple explanation, wondering what had taught someone so young to think about ice cream in terms of comfort and healing rather than just taste. She watched as he carefully counted out his money again, placing each bill and coin on the counter with the precision of someone who understood the value of every penny. "That'll be $4.50, the cashier said gently, and Sarah held her breath as the boy recounted his money one final time, his small face scrunched in concentration. When he looked up with a bright smile and nodded, clearly having enough, Sarah felt an unexpected wave of relief wash over her, as if she had been personally invested in his success. As the girl scooped the ice cream into 2 small cups, Sarah couldn't help but ask, "Are you meeting someone here, sweetie?" The boy turned around, his eyes wide and trusting in the way that only children's eyes can be, and shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'm taking one home to my mom because she's been really sad today and I thought maybe ice cream might help her smile. Again, because that's what my dad used to do when she felt bad. Before he went to heaven." The simple honesty in his words hit Sarah like a physical blow, and she felt tears spring to her eyes as she realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, something that would stay with her forever. This little boy, probably no older than 7, was spending what was likely his allowance or birthday money to buy his grieving mother a small token of comfort, demonstrating a level of empathy and selflessness that put most adults to shame. Your mom is very lucky to have such a thoughtful son, Sarah managed to say, her voice thick with emotion as she watched the boy carefully take both ice cream cups, balancing them with the same care he had shown with his money. What happened next, however, left her completely speechless and would replay in her mind for weeks to come. The boy walked slowly toward the door, concentrating intensely on not dropping either cup, when suddenly he stopped and turned back toward Sarah. "Ma'am, you look kind of sad too," he said with the blunt honesty that only children possess. "And I know I only have enough money for 2 ice creams. But maybe you could share mine with me, because my mom always says that sharing makes everything taste better, and maybe it would help both of us feel less lonely without waiting for an answer." The boy set both cups down on the nearest table and carefully used the small plastic spoon to divide his scoop of vanilla ice cream in half, pushing one portion to the edge of the cup before sliding it across to Sarah. The gesture was so pure, so genuinely selfless, that Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls of cynicism and self-pity crumble completely, placed by an overwhelming sense of wonder at the goodness that could exist in such a small person as. She accepted the offered spoon and took a bite of the shared ice cream. Sarah realized that this 7-year-old boy was teaching her something profound about love, about how healing doesn't always require grand gestures or expensive solutions, but sometimes simply requires the willingness to notice when someone else is hurting and the courage to offer whatever small comfort we can provide. Even when we're carrying our own pain. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, wanting to remember forever the child who had shown her that kindness isn't about having abundance to give, but about giving from whatever abundance of heart we possess. "Tommy," he replied with a gap-toothed smile, "and I think you're going to be okay, just like my mom will be okay, because ice cream has magic powers. Sharing makes the magic even stronger." 3 months later, Sarah found herself volunteering at the local children's hospital every weekend, reading stories to young patients and organizing small activities designed to bring moments of joy into difficult days. She had learned from Tommy that healing often comes not from focusing on our own pain, but from reaching out to comfort others, and that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest transformations in both the giver and the receiver. She never saw Tommy again after that day at the ice cream parlor, but she carried his lesson with her everywhere, sharing his story with friends and colleagues who were struggling with their own challenges, watching as his simple wisdom about the magic of sharing kindness rippled outward like circles on a pond. Sarah had discovered that empathy, like ice cream, becomes more powerful when it's shared, and that children often understand the most important truths about love that adults have. Forgotten Tommy's act of sharing his ice cream had reminded Sarah that strength isn't measured by what we can accomplish alone, but by our willingness to notice and care for others, even in the midst of our own struggles. Every time she saw a child being kind, every time someone offered comfort to a stranger, she remembered that 7-year-old boy who taught her that the human heart, no matter how small, contains infinite capacity for love and healing. If this story reminded you of the incredible wisdom that children carry in their hearts and inspired you to look for small ways to spread kindness in your own community, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the beautiful truth that love multiplies when it's shared. Like and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that even the smallest acts of compassion can change lives. Because sometimes the greatest teachers come in the smallest packages, and the most powerful lessons are learned over shared ice cream.